Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Today, we're going to be tackling a really complex question, one that's been at the forefront of American society for centuries, really.
Right.
What if America never achieves racial equality? Our source material is a thought-provoking article that was published just a few days ago on February 2nd, 2025,
Okay.
with the same title, What if America Never Achieves Racial Equality?
Right.
You know, we often hear about the hope for a more equitable future,
Yeah.
but this article kind of flips the script. It forces us to confront the consequences if that future doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff, but I think it's crucial to understand what's at stake.
I agree. It's a sobering question for sure. And the article does a really good job of grounding its analysis, in a blend of historical context, current data, expert opinions.
Okay.
So before we jump into, the potential fallout of persistent inequality, let's walk through, how we even arrived at this point.
Okay.
It's a long and complicated story. But understanding the historical roots of racial disparities in America is really essential to understanding where we stand today.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock a bit.
Okay.
The article starts at, I think, the obvious starting point, slavery in the 17th century.
Right.
The forced labor, the denial of basic human rights.
Yeah.
It's just a horrifying chapter in our nation's history.
It is.
And it's really, I think, hard to grasp the lasting impact that it's had on everything that followed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's crucial to remember is that the end of slavery in the 19th century didn't magically erase the problem.
Right.
In its place, we saw systems like black codes and Jim Crow laws emerge.
Right.
And these were intentionally designed to maintain white supremacy and prevent Black Americans from fully participating in society.
It's interesting. It's easy to look back at those times and think, oh, well, at least we've progressed since then.
Right.
But then you think about the civil rights movement, figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, fighting tirelessly for equality. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Those dark times weren't actually that long ago.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago at all.
And events like the March on Washington, the Selma marches, really pivotal in pressuring the government to enact change.
For sure.
But they also show just how hard fought every inch of progress has been.
Exactly. And while those movements led to landmark legislation, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, we'd be fooling ourselves to think that that was the end of the story.
Right.
Movements like Black Lives Matter,
Yeah.
which have gained significant traction in recent years,
For sure.
make it clear that we're still grappling with many of the same issues.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder that progress isn't linear. It's an ongoing struggle.
It's a constant push and pull.
So where do things actually stand today?
Well,
The article dives into some pretty grim statistics about the current state of racial inequality in America. And it's hard to ignore just how wide the gaps remain.
it's true. The data paints a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
For instance, you've probably heard about the income gap,
Yeah.
but the numbers are truly startling.
Yeah.
The 2022 U.S. Census Bureau data shows that the median income for Black households is just 61% of what white households earn.
Wow.
It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
And what's often overlooked is that this gap isn't just about
Right.
individual choices or work ethic.
Yeah.
It's a direct result of systemic barriers built up over generations.
Right.
For example, discriminatory housing policies like redlining prevented Black families from accumulating wealth through homeownership,
Right.
a path that many white families have benefited from.
It's like we're dealing with the ghosts of policies past, still haunting us today.
In a way.
And it's not just income, right?
Right.
The article highlights significant disparities in education. It cites data from the National Center for Education Statistics,
Right.
showing that in 2020, only 16% of Black students attended high-performing schools compared to 45% of white students.
That's a huge gap.
That's a massive gap in opportunity right from the start.
Yeah.
How can we expect people to succeed when they're not even given access to the same quality of education?
You raise a critical point.
Yeah.
These statistics aren't just numbers on a page.
Right.
They represent real lives and lost potential.
Yeah.
And what's even more alarming is that They're not isolated incidents.
Right.
They're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Forming a complex web of disadvantage.
Yeah.
That impacts nearly every facet of life.
It's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah, it is.
Inequality in one area spills over into others, creating this vicious cycle that's incredibly difficult to break free from.
A cycle that's very difficult to break free from.
The article doesn't shy away from the potential consequences if these trends continue.
Right.
And it outlines 3 major areas of concern.
Okay.
Social unrest, economic decline,
right,
and the weakening of our democracy.
Okay.
To be honest, those all sound pretty terrifying.
They are very real concerns.
Yeah.
Let's start with social unrest.
Okay.
The article argues that persistent inequality leads to simmering resentment, frustration, and anger.
Right.
Emotions that can very easily erupt into protests, demonstrations, even violence.
Yeah.
We've seen this pattern throughout history.
Right.
And the article suggests it could become more frequent and intense if these deep-seated disparities aren't addressed.
It's a scary thought, but it's hard to deny the link between inequality and social unrest.
It's a well-established link.
And on the economic front, the consequences seem just as dire.
Yeah.
If a significant portion of the population is held back by discrimination,
it limits our economic potential as a nation.
Absolutely.
It's not just about fairness.
Right.
It's about hurting ourselves in the long run.
Precisely. The article discusses the impact of discrimination on workforce participation.
Right.
Skill gaps due to unequal access to education and reduced innovation. It paints a picture of businesses struggling to find qualified workers.
Right.
And communities trapped in cycles of poverty, hindering economic growth for everyone.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that discrimination doesn't just hurt the individuals targeted.
Right.
It hurts us all.
And then there's the impact on our democracy.
Right.
Which seems maybe a bit less tangible, but just as concerning.
It's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
You see, when people feel like the system is rigged against them, when their voices aren't heard, it can lead to disenfranchisement and political apathy.
Right.
Particularly among marginalized groups.
Yeah.
Imagine feeling like your vote doesn't matter.
Like the political system is indifferent to your concerns.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Can you explain what you mean by disenfranchisement?
Sure.
I think some people might assume that just means being unable to vote.
Right.
But it sounds like it goes a lot deeper than that.
You're right. It is a broader concept.
Okay.
Disenfranchisement is about feeling powerless.
Okay.
Like you're excluded from the decision-making processes that shape your life. It can manifest as low voter turnout.
Right.
But it can also lead to cynicism, distrust in institutions, and a withdrawal from civic engagement altogether.
Okay.
And this creates a dangerous void.
Right.
That can be filled by extremist ideologies.
Yeah.
And those seeking to exploit division for their own gain.
So it's not just about fairness at the ballot box. It's about the health of our democracy as a whole.
Exactly.
It sounds like we're talking about a domino effect here.
It is a domino effect.
Inequality fuels unrest, which destabilizes the economy, which weakens our political institutions.
It's a chain reaction.
That's a pretty dire scenario.
It is a concerning scenario.
But I'm curious, does the article offer any solutions?
It does.
Is there a way to break this cycle?
It does offer some potential paths forward.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that even in the face of such daunting challenges, there's always hope.
Okay.
But before we delve into those solutions,
I
think it's worth exploring the cultural impact of persistent inequality.
Okay.
How it shapes our identities, our communities, our sense of belonging.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. Let's dive into that in part 2.
So, we often focus on the economic and political consequences of racial inequality. But the cultural ramifications are just as profound, shaping how we see ourselves and each other.
I'm really interested to hear more about this. It's not something we talk about as often, but it feels incredibly important.
It's crucial the article delves into how ongoing inequalities shape, individual and collective identities.
Okay.
And it raises some, thought-provoking questions.
Yeah.
Imagine facing barriers in almost every aspect of your life.
Right.
From education to employment, healthcare to housing, simply because of your race.
Right.
Over time, that experience inevitably shapes your worldview, your sense of self.
Yeah.
and your place in society.
Makes sense that you'd start to question where you truly belong.
Yeah.
If you constantly encounter these obstacles.
Right.
It must feel like you're being told,
Yeah.
either directly or indirectly, that you're not fully valued or accepted
Right.
by the larger society.
Exactly. And the article argues that this can lead to a fragmentation of identity.
Okay.
Where individuals feeling excluded from the mainstream seek a sense of belonging and solidarity.
Right.
Primarily within their own racial group.
Okay.
Now, it's important to clarify that cultural pride and affinity within one's racial or ethnic group
are not inherently negative.
Oh.
In fact, they can be sources of strength and resilience.
But wouldn't focusing solely on racial identity risk further dividing us?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
How do we balance cultural pride
Right.
with a sense of shared national identity when that inward focus is primarily driven by exclusion and a lack of belonging in the broader society?
Right.
It can limit opportunities for cross-cultural understanding and cooperation.
Yeah, makes sense.
And as we discussed earlier, that lack of interaction and dialogue between different racial groups often reinforces existing stereotypes and biases.
Right.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Inequality breeds separation, which breeds more inequality.
It's almost like we're creating a nation of silos.
It is a risk.
Where people retreat into their own groups instead of building bridges and finding common ground.
Right.
It's a bit disheartening to hear how deeply ingrained this cycle of inequality is. It is a deep-rooted problem.
But the article does offer some solutions, right?
It does.
What are some concrete steps we can take to break free from this pattern?
The article outlines some potential paths forward.
Okay.
And they fall into a few key categories.
Right.
First, it emphasizes the importance of robust anti-discrimination policies across all sectors: education, employment, housing, healthcare, and criminal justice.
Right. It's one thing to have laws against discrimination.
Right.
But they're meaningless if they're not actually enforced.
Exactly. They got to have teeth.
Yeah.
If we're going to see real change.
But as you pointed out earlier, laws alone can't change hearts and minds.
They can't.
They provide a framework.
They do.
But true transformation requires a deeper shift.
It does.
In attitudes and beliefs.
Absolutely.
And that's where things get tricky, right?
That's the hard part.
You can't legislate empathy or understanding.
You can't legislate those things.
So how do we cultivate those qualities on a societal level?
Well, the article highlights the vital role of grassroots movements you've seen throughout history.
Yeah.
That lasting change often starts from the ground up. Driven by people who are directly impacted by injustice.
Right.
Think about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
It was fueled by the tireless efforts of everyday people.
Right.
Organizing, protesting, and demanding a better future.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play.
We do.
In dismantling these systems of oppression.
Yeah.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it.
We can't be passive.
Speaking of roles,
Okay.
The article also talks about the importance of education.
Right.
And I think that's a key piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. Education is crucial.
Yeah.
On multiple levels.
Okay.
For one, we need to teach accurate and inclusive history, ensuring that the narratives of marginalized groups are given equal weight and consideration.
Yeah.
For too long, our understanding of history has been skewed, leaving out crucial perspectives, perpetuating harmful myths.
Yeah.
We need to expose young people to the full story of our nation.
Right.
Warts and all.
Yeah.
So they can understand how we got to where we are today.
It's about understanding the systemic nature of inequality.
It is.
How it's baked into the very fabric of our society.
Exactly.
But I also think it's about fostering empathy.
Yeah.
And challenging biases.
Right.
If we can help young people understand different perspectives and experiences,
For sure.
it can plant the seeds for a more just and equitable future.
Precisely. And beyond history lessons, schools need to be actively promoting diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
In their curricula, their hiring practices, and overall culture.
Yeah.
It's about creating environments where differences are celebrated,
Right.
not just tolerated,
Yeah.
and where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.
It's about shifting the paradigm from simply tolerating diversity to actually embracing it as a strength.
I like that.
But I think this goes beyond schools too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The article also calls for greater collaboration between the public and private sectors.
Okay.
Businesses in particular have a responsibility to promote diversity and inclusion within their own ranks.
Right.
And it's not just about meeting quotas or checking boxes.
Right.
It's about creating a truly inclusive workplace where everyone has a fair shot at success, regardless of their race or background.
Strong policies are crucial, but how do we ensure they're implemented fairly?
That's a good question.
And don't create unintended consequences.
Right.
History is full of well-intentioned policies that backfired.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
It's not enough to simply implement policies.
Right.
We need to constantly evaluate their impact, identify any unintended consequences, and be willing to adapt and adjust as needed.
Okay.
It requires ongoing dialogue, community engagement, and a commitment to transparency and accountability.
It sounds like a multi-pronged approach.
It is.
We need strong policies, grassroots activism, educational reforms, and corporate responsibility, all working in tandem.
All those things need to work together.
But I'm sensing a but coming.
There is a but.
Okay.
Even with all these solutions in place, achieving racial equality won't be easy.
Right.
It's a deeply ingrained problem, woven into the very fabric of our nation.
Right.
It's going to require sustained effort, uncomfortable conversations, and a willingness to challenge our own biases and assumptions.
It's not a quick fix.
It's not.
It's a long-term commitment.
It is a long-term commitment.
It's like we're trying to untangle a giant knot.
It is like untangling a knot.
And it's going to take time, patience, and persistence.
Patience and persistence.
To work through all those knots.
To work through all the tangles.
So it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen overnight.
No, it won't.
But the article ends on a cautiously optimistic note.
It does.
Arguing that while the challenges are immense, the potential rewards are even greater.
They are.
A society that embraces racial equality is a society that unlocks the full potential of all its citizens.
Absolutely.
A society that's more vibrant.
More vibrant.
And ultimately more prosperous.
It's
a vision worth striving for.
It is a vision worth striving for.
Even if the road ahead is long and bumpy.
Even if the road is bumpy.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all in this together.
We are all in this together.
So where do we go from here?
That's the question.
What can we as individuals do to contribute to a more equitable future?
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
I think that's the question on everyone's mind. After hearing all of this, as we're wrapping up this deep dive, it's hard not to feel a little overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the challenge. We've uncovered these deep historical roots of racial inequality. We confronted the stark realities of the present and even glimpsed at the potential consequences if we fail to course correct.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It's a lot.
It is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But, as you said, it's absolutely crucial to grapple with these issues. What strikes me is the interconnected nature of it all.
Yeah.
It's not just about income inequality or disparities in education or the criminal justice system. It's about how all of these systems intertwine to create this web of disadvantage.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult to break free from.
It's like we've been talking about this tangled knot this whole time.
Right.
And now we're really starting to see how complex it truly is.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that central question posed by the article. What if America never achieves racial equality?
What if?
What does that world look like for us, for our children, for future generations?
It's not a future any of us want to imagine.
No.
A society perpetually on edge.
Yeah.
Riven by distrust and resentment.
Right.
Where opportunity is determined by the color of your skin.
Right.
Rather than the content of your character.
Yeah.
Economic growth would be stunted. Innovation stifled.
Right.
As entire segments of the population are denied the chance to contribute their talents and reach their full potential.
We'd be leaving so much on the table.
So much.
Not just in terms of economic prosperity, but in terms of human potential.
Human potential.
It's like we'd be operating with one hand tied behind our back as a nation.
Exactly.
And our democracy would be fragile.
Yeah.
Vulnerable to manipulation and extremism.
Absolutely.
As those who feel excluded and unheard seek alternative paths to power.
Right.
We've already seen how easily misinformation and division can exploit existing fractures in our society. Imagine how much more potent those forces would become in a world where racial inequality remains unaddressed.
It's a scary thought.
this conversation is making me think about my own experiences and biases. I'm starting to realize how much I've taken for granted.
Right.
How much I've benefited from a system that's rigged in my favor.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to acknowledge.
It is.
But I think that discomfort is necessary.
It is.
If we're going to make real progress.
That's a profound insight.
Yeah.
And you're right, discomfort is often the catalyst for growth. Recognizing our own biases and complicity in systems of oppression is the first step toward dismantling them.
So where do we go from here? We've talked about potential solutions, policies, movements, education, corporate responsibility.
Yeah.
But it all feels a bit abstract.
I understand.
What can we as individuals do?
Right. What can we do?
To make a tangible difference.
Yeah.
What actions can we take in our daily lives to contribute to a more equitable future?
You know, I think it starts with awareness, which is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
By engaging in these conversations, by educating ourselves about the history and ongoing realities of racial inequality.
Yeah.
We're already taking a step in the right direction.
Okay.
But awareness without action is meaningless.
So what does action look like?
Right.
What are some concrete steps we can take?
There are so many ways to contribute, support organizations fighting for racial justice, donate your time or money to groups working on the ground to address these issues.
Right.
Challenge discrimination when you see it.
Yeah.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Educate yourself and others about the history of systemic racism and how it continues to shape our present.
Right.
And most importantly, vote for policies that promote equality and hold your elected officials accountable.
It's like we're all players in this giant game of Monopoly. But some players started with all the properties and hotels.
Right.
We need to change the rules of the game.
We need to change the rules.
Like, fair for everyone.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It captures the essence of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We need to challenge the systems that perpetuate inequality.
Right.
And create a more level playing field.
And it sounds like we need to be patient.
Yeah.
We're not going to undo centuries of injustice overnight.
You're absolutely right. Progress will likely be incremental.
Yeah.
With setbacks and frustrations along the way.
Right.
But even small actions multiplied across millions of people can have a profound impact.
Right.
Remember, the fight for racial equality isn't a sprint.
Right.
It's a marathon.
It is.
So let's not get overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenge.
Yeah.
Let's focus on what we can control.
Right.
Our own actions, our own choices, our own commitment to creating a better world.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Into a truly complex issue.
It was a pleasure.
We hope it's left you with some food for thought.
I hope so.
And more importantly, a renewed sense of purpose.
Absolutely.
And the motivation to make a difference.
That's what it's all about.